I'm Dana K. White of aslobcomesclean.com and author of Decluttering at the Speed of Life. So I talk a lot about the container concept. It basically comes up in every single answer to every single decluttering question. Whether people say to me, well, here's my unique situation. It's really emotional because of this, or I have this weird, I'm in a house that's temporary right now, or whatever the unique situation that people have, 99% of the time, my answer to their question starts with the words, well, it all comes down to the container concept. I mean, really, the container concept is everything. If you will grasp this concept, it will change how you see your home, how you see your stuff. It will help you make decisions about what needs to stay and what needs to go without ripping your heart out, okay? So I'm just gonna give a little demonstration of the container concept so that you can grasp it, all right? So let's say that I had a whole lot of pens, and let's say that I love pens. Somebody in my house loves pens, and she keeps hers under control, so it's fine. But let's just say that these pens right here are constantly a source of frustration to me, okay? Here's how my brain would work, okay? I would think, I love these pens. I love pens. Pens are great. Pens are useful. Obviously, I need to keep my pens. And then I would think about my friend's house and how she loves pens too, and how in her house, they look amazing. And in my house, it's just this big mass of stuff and it's constantly out of control. And I would think, well, but she has a cute little glass jar to put her pens in. And I would think, that's it. That's the difference between her and me, is she has a glass jar and I don't have a glass jar. So I would get a glass jar and I would come home and I would start putting my pens, maybe a little neater than this, but into the glass jar. And I would be like, oh, this is great. Finally, my house is gonna look as good as her house looks because I've got a glass jar now. So woo, everything's changing because of this glass jar. And so I'd put my pens in and I'd be like, wow, this is, okay, seriously. And I would keep sticking the pens into the jar. And I would be like, okay, this looks nothing like her glass jar with pens in it. I mean, like, what is the difference? Why does this not work for me the way it works for her? I got the glass jar, hello. Anyway, as I was working in my house one day, I was talking to myself because that's what I do. And I said, contain. The root word of container is contain. What does contain mean? Well, it means to set a limit. And it helped me suddenly realize that I had been using containers incorrectly. I thought containers were for putting things in. So I thought she put her pens in a cute glass jar. So if I get a cute glass jar and I put my pens in it, then we're gonna be the same. But what I didn't realize is she was using the glass jar as a container. She was using it as a limit. So this is how I think of it. When you hear that there is a fire and firemen are fighting the fire, you hear that they are working to contain the fire. They are working to create a boundary. And their goal is to keep the fire within that boundary, to contain the fire. If the fire goes outside of those boundaries, bad things happen. They can't keep it under control if it goes outside of those boundaries. And when I realized that a container is meant to contain, it's meant to serve as a limit, as a boundary, everything changed about how I was decluttering, okay? And I realized I wasn't actually using containers correctly. I was just sticking stuff in them. And then this is how it would go. I would go, this isn't fair. It doesn't work the same way for me that it does for her. This always happens. My container is full, so obviously I need another container. And so then I would fill the other container and I would get it full. This container doesn't really work. This doesn't look like it looks in her house. So my options, I thought, were either to leave it looking janky and wonky or get another container. Oh my goodness. And so, all right. So now I have 3 containers and I thought, okay, this is good. Except when I went to put these containers on the shelf, I realized my shelf doesn't have room for all of these containers. So I thought, well, obviously I need another shelf. So then I would buy more shelves and think that they were going to solve my clutter problem. But I would eventually get to the point where I didn't have room for any more shelves. And I would think, okay, well, obviously we need a new house and we can't afford a new house. So I am doomed to be disorganized forever. And I did not understand why it was that I couldn't do what I thought my friend was doing and have it work out the same way in my home. When in reality, I was not doing what she was doing. I was not using containers as limits. Y'all, this is the thing that people who are naturally organized are born knowing without knowing that they know it, and without knowing that there are some of us who don't know it. This is the thing that professional organizers email me and say, thanks for explaining where the breakdown in communication was between me and my clients. Thanks for explaining why it felt like we were speaking a different language. It's because people like me, we don't see limits. It's a great quality in a lot of ways, but not so much when we're trying to get our stuff under control, okay? So here's how it works when I actually embrace this glass jar as a container, okay? Same amount of pens that I'm starting with, all right? And I say, this is what my friend has. Her house looks amazing. This is a container. It's meant to serve as a limit. So I'm going to put my favorite pens in there first, all right? So I know I love that. Well, that's exactly the same. I really, really love those. This is acting because these are my daughter's pens and I'm not really a pen person, but hey. Okay, which ones are my favorite? Oh, yep. My container is full. But here's what happens in my brain when I fill the container with my favorite ones first. Something clicks in my brain when this is full and makes me realize, oh, actually, I probably don't need all of these pens. This is enough. Like, I have the colors that I want and my favorite ones, and it was fun to put my favorite ones in there first. And I let this container be the limit to how many pens I can keep, which is incredibly freeing because I don't have to look at every single pen and say, does this pen have value? Is this a pen that I might need someday? Is there a potential hypothetical scenario where I might wish I had this gray Sharpie? Might I ever be desperate? Like, those are the questions that can make my brain just spin out. Because if you want to ask me 100 ways that I might possibly use this exact pen in the future, oh, I can come up with 100 ways. Because that's where I'm actually, that's my thing, is coming up with creative ideas. So letting the container be the limit frees me from all of those hypothetical things that my brain can come up with. And instead, it just says, does it fit in the container or not? Is it more container worthy than something else that's in here? Because here's the thing, guaranteed, you're gonna fill the container at some point. And what would happen to me is I would be like, oh, Finally, I figured this out. I finally understand what it is that organized people know that I never understood. Oh no, I love this pen. This one is my actual favorite. Sometimes, it didn't make it into the first round because it was on my desk where I was using it, or on the coffee table, or whatever, someplace where I've actually been, working it into my life. And the way I used to react to finding one more thing when it was already full would be to say, that's proof. It doesn't work for me like it does for other people. Something always happens. I think I've gotten organized, and then I actually haven't. And in reality, this is where the one in, one out rule comes in. Again, some people are born knowing, and I was not born knowing. Guys, I was at a mom's group meeting when my kids were little bitty, and there was a speaker there on organizing, and somebody asked a question about when you bring new stuff in, and she goes, oh, the one in, one out rule. And everybody went, and I went, but I had no idea what they were talking about. Like, it made no sense to me when people said one in, one out, because she was talking about a sock drawer, and I was picturing my sock drawer, and I was like, my sock drawer doesn't close anyway, so what good does it do to take one pair of socks out when I get a new pair of socks? I'm like, I didn't understand that my sock drawer was a container. My sock drawer was the size of my sock drawer was the limit to how many socks I could actually have, and my house stay under control. Because if I had more socks than would fit in my sock drawer wasn't going to close. And then it was never going to look okay. So once I understood that a container is a limit, then I understood the whole one in, one out. That's how you maintain decluttering progress. First, you declutter down to the size of the container. And in the blanket video, I show you how that works in real life as I'm taking things out, as opposed to having everything out and then putting it into a new container. But that's how you maintain progress, is once you've decluttered down to the size of the container, then every new thing that comes in, or everything that you need to put in that container, all you have to do is say, okay, what am I willing to get rid of in order to keep this thing that I know I love? And sometimes it makes me go, oh, well, I've got two right here that are basically almost the exact same color. And then it frees me because I'm just saying, which one's more container worthy? I'm not saying, does this have value? I'm saying, does it fit in the container? Which is more container worthy? Make sense? Okay, so once I realized that a container is meant to contain, it also hit me that every space in my home is a container. This is why I call it the container concept. Every shelf is a container, and it determines how many things I can put on that shelf and it still be usable. I'm not talking about shoving it all in there. I'm saying, and make it be usable so that I can get out what I need to get out without having to dig and pull everything out, okay? So every shelf is a container, every drawer is a container, every cabinet is a container, every closet is a container, every room in my home is a container, and my house is a container. The size of my house is the size of my house. And decluttering down to the point where I only have what fits comfortably and usably in my house, that's the goal of decluttering. Okay, embrace each individual container. And then here's my little preachy part. I also realized that my family gets priority space in the container that is our house. Okay, meaning they need room to be able to sit down and relax, or use the table to do homework, or whatever it is that they need to do in our home for it to be their home. That's priority in this container. So I can't have stuff that's in my house that then takes up the room that they need to be able to live within our home, okay? Think of your house as a container. Think of every space in your home as a limit, as a boundary that helps you decide what stays and what goes. Not by asking yourself 1,000 questions about each individual item, not by saying whether or not you love or like an individual item, but instead by saying, is there room? Does it fit in my space? So I don't have to reject this pen. I don't have to say, pen, I don't like you. Guys, that kind of stuff is hard for me. I mean, like, I'm the person who sees the value in everything. So saying, pen, you have no value, like sometimes people are like, why would you keep that? I'm like, oh, I can come up with a reason to keep it. But it felt like I was rejecting stuff to let it go when it still technically could be used. But I'm freed from that by embracing the container and blaming the container. So I can say, you have to go. It's not me. I would keep you. That's how nice of a person I am. I would keep you. I see your value. It's the container. The container is the one that made this decision, not me. All right, that's the container concept. It changes everything when you can wrap your head around it. And go watch my other videos where I pretty much mention it all the time. So in not next week, but the week after that, I'll have another video where I declutter a space. I think it's actually the space where I realized the container concept. I'm going to declutter it again because it's been a lot of years and so it needs to be decluttered again. And I will show you how this works in the actual process of decluttering. Okay, y'all have fun decluttering. I'll talk to y'all next week.